Is there a coaching problem for the New Orleans Pelicans? Maybe, but I don't think anything needs to change right now. We got a lot to talk about in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Wednesday here, one more day, and we get a Pelicans home game as the regular season resumes. 27 more games to go for New Orleans. Are they going to get home court? They're going to stay in the 6th seed. They're going to end up in the play-in tournament. We're going to kind of discuss that with a view of coaching in today's episode, so I'm excited about this show. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, breaking down everything you want to know about the team. Become an everydayer. Listen Monday through Friday. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, where there's almost 10,000 of y'all. That's an awesome number to hear. So let's dive into this one. I've got this show planned out. It's probably going to go a little off the rails as other things kind of come up. Okay, we're looking at, do the Pelicans need to make a change? Do they have a problem with coaching? Right? I don't know, but I know this. I don't think they necessarily need to make changes this season with what Willie Green is doing or anything like that. Let me know if you disagree in the comments down below, but trust me, you're going to want to listen to all three parts of today's show. So let's start with this, something I've been saying. This team is good. This team is good. They're 11 games over 500. I've been negative on them like very often, but this team is good. The results speak for themselves, right? Since that loss to the Lakers in the in-season tournament, they're top 10 in both offensive rating and defensive rating. They're top 8, I think, in net rating. So the end results are good for now, right? Big asterisks there for now. Because when you get into the process of this team and how they're achieving those results, right? Process versus results. That's what's on the little sidebar here. That's where things, I think, get kind of interesting, right? Because the bench is doing the work, kind of. The bench in 1 or 2 starters is doing the work. The starters aren't at all. Even if you sub Larry Nance Jr. in for Jonas Valanciunas, that really doesn't fix like anything. This team's still kind of abysmal in half-court offense no matter what. It's the other groups that are kind of winning games for the Pelicans. You know, that's not going to work to win a title. That won't work at all to win a title. You don't get to run opponents' 10th and 11th men off the court in the playoffs, right? Teams sometimes run just an 8-man rotation in the playoffs, you know? And so while this team might be good, knowing that like makes the season feel disappointing, right? It feels tough to enjoy the ride, and it's a good ride when you know the ending isn't what you want, when you know the car's going to run out of gas and not get you to your ultimate destination, which is an NBA title, right? So if you know how it ends, car running out of gas, car crash, who knows, right? Then you need to make changes, right? Don't you? You know, Willie Green needs to grow, adjust as a coach, win some more games, and try and make this team better so that they can win a title. Well, maybe not. And I think that could be more by design than you think. That's also coming up here in the next segment of today's show. There's also only so much you can do with the roster you have. And if players don't or won't do what you want them to do, right? Like we've talked about, and they've all talked about how Brandon Ingram needs to shoot more threes, and he doesn't. Like you can't micromanage him at that level of detail when they're out on the court playing, right? Like you put the ball in their hands and that's that. You know, even if you're upset with Ingram, and Ingram's played at a good level this year, right? It's not like you're going to bench him. Not Brandon Ingram, maybe other players, but certainly not him, right? You know, we've said they need to run more point Zion, but if other players don't do that, and they've said they want to put the ball in Zion's hands more, you know, there's only so much you can do if everyone else isn't really fitting into that. That also then creates a problem, something they've tried to avoid by building an identity, right? Of where, okay, well, if Zion gets hurt, what do you do? Now, I'd counter with that of like, if Zion gets hurt, who cares? If he's your best player and the guy who's supposed to lead you, if he's hurt, who cares if you have an identity? Because you're still not going to win games and it's not going to truly matter. You can't create this like star-proof offense. So you run into things like this, right? Like it just creates this feeling of, okay, well, this team's not reaching their potential. And they're not. How do we get them to reach their potential? Better coaching, better other things. There's balance to all of this. Right? I'm going to use a not great analogy in the next segment that I think you'll hopefully understand, right? But there's risk with all of this. The Western Conference is tight right now. This team is 6th. They're essentially tied with the Phoenix Suns for 5th, but they're 6th right now. They are 1 game ahead of the Dallas Mavericks, who are 7th. 7 through 10 is the play-in tournament, right? They're 1.5 games up on the Sacramento Kings at 8. There are 3.5 games up on the Lakers. But if there's a 3-game swing here, and I'll say this again in the next segment, you drop to 8th, let's say. Now, all of a sudden, you're in the play-in tournament when you don't want to be. If you somehow fall to 9th or 10th, right, you're still in the play-in tournament, but then you need to win 2 games to get in versus just 1. There's a significant difference there, right? And I think something to kind of consider in mind is these seasons are connected. This season is connected to next season, even if we don't know how that's going to go yet. You're doing things now that kind of pay off next season too. While each season is its own thing, it's also connected to the next one as well. And sometimes it's tough to take the long view with that. But we're going to do that here in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans, a little bit at least. So let's get more into maybe why you're not seeing some adjustments, right? If we know how this team is, that there's a ceiling, and look, internally, the Pelicans know this too, right? Like they're evaluating this team more so than we are here. They have an idea of what their cap is, what they're capable of achieving this year. And I don't think anyone in that building thinks they're a title contending team, that they could win the NBA title like right now this season, unless there's like injuries to every other team. And that's a great equalizer. So if they know that, they should make changes, right? Do something to elevate your ceiling, right? It feels like that's what they should be doing. Not so fast. It's going to tie into stuff we've talked about and more. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I'm excited to tell you about FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA and the official sportsbook of Locked On. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans also brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. If you don't have people in those roles, you're putting on too many hats. Things might be suffering with your business, and you can't have that. You know, it can be live or die. You don't want to be in a situation like that. So LinkedIn Jobs is here for you. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. And LinkedIn does all of that while making the process easy and intuitive. So LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats, they might not have the time or resources to hire. So you can make it easy with LinkedIn. Post your job for free at LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNBA. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Tell a friend about the show. Join the over we'll get to 10,000 by the end of the season on YouTube, which I think is incredible. And comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on head coach Willie Green. So I will say this. he is not making changes, right? Like, he is a stubborn coach, it feels like. And at times when it's like some things are obvious that they could change or fix and it would make him better, he does not do that. He's not doing that currently. There are some times when he changes things too. But in general, he has guys he trusts, other guys he doesn't trust, like Jordan Hawkins. We'll touch on that in this segment and the next segment too. Mainly, kind of maybe in the next segment as well. So it's frustrating when, come on, like, we all see some of these things. We do. Like, some of these are obvious. You don't need to be in the NBA. You don't need to have been a former player or anything like that to be like, what are we doing here, right? You know, sometimes just decisions are maddening. Go back to the play-in tournament 2 years ago against the Clippers, those Tony Snell minutes where they almost lost the game instead of playing Trey Murphy, right? Like, that was a big problem. Or even go back, like, last year, right, where he played Kyra Lewis Jr. in the play-in tournament when Kyra hadn't played in like 5 games and like those minutes were bad. More on that in a minute though, right? So changes, they need to make some if we know how this is going to end. Not necessarily. Like, I mean that. Not necessarily. They're winning. They're winning, right? They're on pace to have like a top 4 season in franchise history. Do you want to mess with success? Like, do you want to mess with this winning formula? We might not like the process, and I don't, but the results are kind of speaking for themselves, right? Do you mess with success? I say this depends on your expectations a little bit, you know, and the expectations you have might be different than another fan, right? And it might be different than what I have, and it might be different, more importantly, than what the team thinks internally. You know, if the goal is to avoid the play-in, well, the team's 6, right? Keep doing what you're doing, and in theory, you should avoid the play-in tournament. They're achieving that. You know, do you want to change things or do you want to hit your goals? You know, you're also, I think, gathering data on what works and what doesn't. You know, and there's still unknowns. Like, we know they need a different center, right? We figured that out. It's a valuable piece of information to know. There's also unknown stuff. How do Zion and Brandon Ingram work together and play together in the playoffs? Well, to find that out, you need to get there, right? You could make a dramatic change or a change for change's sake, and it could mess that up. Go back a year ago, and this is like a reverse analogy. It makes sense, but also doesn't quite work, which is like a thing I do on the show, okay? Pels were 4-2 going into the All-Star break after they had that rough losing streak. Going into the All-Star break 4-2, Trey Murphy had been starting. Post All-Star break, for kind of no reason, Trey Murphy was benched. And the team promptly goes 0-3. Now, it was a mistake to bench Trey Murphy. I think we all agree with that. But those type of changes can mess you up. So if you take Herb Jones out, put in Trey Murphy, maybe you go 0-3, right? If you start Larry Nance Jr. over Jonas Valanciunas, maybe you go 0-3. Remember what I said? If there's a 3-game swing here, all of a sudden they're in 8th, kind of only a half game up on 9th. It's a difference between winning 1 game in the play-in tournament versus 2 or being in it entirely, right? Those type of dramatic changes can absolutely mess you up. Do the Pels want to risk that? If you know you're not going to win a title this year and you can't really elevate your ceiling this year, and they can raise their ceiling significantly, but I think there's bigger changes to do that. Do the Pels want to risk a bad run of form in a very tight Western Conference? Probably not, right? Like, probably not. They think they just want the 6th seed or better and figure it out in the postseason with whatever, right? If you got to play Minnesota in the first round, you probably feel comfortable with that, right? If you play, you know, who's currently 3rd in the West, the Clippers in the first round, I think they might feel they can win that series, right? You know, do you want to mess with success? Rhymes, it works, right? I'm not sure that the answer is yes. Now, before we get too far ahead, and we'll go more into Willie Green, and particularly in the next segment here, don't think that Willie Green and David Griffin aren't aligned on all of this, right? Like, Willie Green was Griffin's hire. He was somewhat like inheriting Alvin Gentry, even if they, at the time, they don't anymore, had a good relationship. But he chose Willie Green partially because he could probably have some input. He definitely had input on starting Larry Nance Jr. in the second half of some of those games that, by the way, didn't work. So they're probably aligned on what's going on. If they want some changes, they can kind of maybe force Willie Green to kind of test or make those changes, right? try him out at least for a little bit. They're maybe purposely choosing not to make big wholesale changes to this team right now because they're also winning games. Again, I don't think the offense is very pretty at times, but they're getting victories. And the defense has been good all season long. So while, yes, they struggled going into the All-Star break, there could be reasons for them. There's always more factors in play when it comes to things, as I kick stuff, around all of this, right? So I don't necessarily think that it's Willie Green won't make changes or is too stubborn. He certainly is stubborn at times, but we've also seen some growth and some, opportunity for changes from him. And maybe this is just all by design, right? Like if you were the 10th seed, do something dramatically differently, right? But as the 6th seed, where you feel good that they're not necessarily a play-in tournament team, I don't know if you need to change much right now. I truly mean that. As much as I'm not happy with this is where you're trying to balance process versus results. The results are good. Doesn't mean they can't get better. Doesn't mean they shouldn't change things. But, when you're dealing with only 27 games left to go and every game kind of has a heightened sense to it because one game could mess you up. Where's your risk tolerance with this? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'm curious. It's a genuine question, right? I think some of the lack of changes and some of the stuff that they're doing or not doing, I should say here, is by design because they're being not just very, there's just not a ton of tolerance for risk. They don't want to risk it. Let's just stick with what we're doing because the results are getting there, even if we have to kind of scrap out some of these wins, even if maybe it's not us at our full potential, but this is good enough for right now. That, I think, is something that's probably going through the minds of this team and everything that they're looking to try and do and accomplish. Again, it goes to expectations. What are your expectations? Let me know those in the comments down below on YouTube. But if it's simply this team getting into the playoffs and then gathering more data once you get in there, and that's valuable, right? If you get into the postseason as the 6th seed and BI and Zion hit a different level, that changes how you're going to approach the offseason. If you get into the postseason and they completely flame out, get swept in the first round because they just don't work well together, that's a different story too, right? All of that's important to know. And right now, that's a big question mark on this team. Get that answered. And then go into next season go into the offseason knowing what you need to do and how you need to improve and have a better blueprint for it. This is kind of the first time that we're seeing some of this stuff because usually Zion and BI aren't healthy right now. We haven't seen this in 3 years, right? We've never even seen Zion and BI in the playoffs together. So this is an opportunity to figure a lot of that out. Why mess with that when that's maybe the biggest question you need answered? Not should Jordan Hawkins be in the rotation or not. It's does BI and Ingram play together? And look, with Hawkins and stuff like this, we talked about it in yesterday's show a little bit. His numbers aren't pretty. His numbers aren't pretty when it comes to, how he's playing. Let's save this and I'll talk about it more coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. A little bit of Jordan Hawkins talk, then more about potentially moving on from head coach Willie Green, why or why not to do that. And I think there's some misconceptions and some things you need to put in context around that. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I'm excited to tell you about eBay Motors. Drive, passion, patience. It's what brings home the winning trophy, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers make it go faster. Roof racks, more utility. Exhaust kits make it sound louder. LED headlights just to look cool and actually see at night. Whatever it is, whether you're into speed, power, style, eBay Motors has you covered. I work on all of my cars. I order all of my parts from eBay Motors because they have over 122 million parts for your vehicle. You're going to always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. You put your vehicle in there, the make, the model, the year. And then if a part fits your car, there's a little check on it. And you know that's a safe thing to buy. And the prices are great because you're going to want to buy it. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your vehicle on the road over at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join the almost 10,000 of y'all on YouTube as well. Comment down below on YouTube and tell a friend about the show. We're here Monday through Friday. Shout out to the everydayers. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So let's continue talking about head coach Willie Green and kind of why we're not seeing some of the changes that maybe we want to see. Look, they're winning. Like, don't mess with it that much. I mean that. I want to get into the playoffs. I want to have home playoff games. We haven't had that in a while, and it's fun. You need to build a little bit momentum going into next season. That's a way to do it. You make big changes. You miss the playoffs. We're looking at even bigger overhauls and drastic changes when I don't think that needs to be the case just to tinker because you just want to tinker. Right? The results are actually good. This is balancing process, which I don't think is great, versus results, which are good. So what does this all mean about Willie Green and say about Willie Green and all of that, right? Like, I don't think it necessarily means that he's like stagnating as a head coach. I do think part of this is just by design. They're winning. Let's not mess with things too much. Little things here and there, yes. But overall, I don't think we need to mess with too much. You know, one of the big complaints is he's not playing Jordan Hawkins, who as a rookie has been good, I think. But also when you're trying to win games, right, and offense is the biggest issue for them, and Hawkins is shooting 38% on over 5 attempts per game. Why isn't he playing? Defense is a thing too. Now, I think the defense can get by with Jordan Hawkins out there on the court alongside, whoever. But for the most part, those units have not been particularly elite. And that worries me when it comes to things, right? Like, you need to be winning games, have good net ratings, all of those things. And Hawkins in general, when he's on the court, has been a net negative, right? Now, there's some lineups where he does well, some lineups that he doesn't do well. The lineups where he does do well, he's paired with Dyson Daniels. So you have an elite defensive stopper in the backcourt along with him. You don't have that right now, right? Like, that's, I think, a little bit of a concern here, and when he plays with the starting group, say you take out CJ, put in Hawkins, it hasn't been great. That has a bad net rating in very limited minutes. So it's really tough to try and find some of these right lineups where he can go out there and kind of like do the things that you want. And again, if they're winning, don't play him. Just do what's working right now. Get into the playoffs and know that he's going to need to have a bigger role next season. Now, I'd like to see him play more, but I kind of understand right now them maybe not doing that because at least you're winning games here. You're playing good minutes, right? Like, in the limited minutes that he's played with CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, and Zion. So a short lineup with Zion at the 5. Ain't good. Now, it's like almost no possessions where we shouldn't really read into anything with this. So you're seeing Willie Green not try some of those lineups at all. But at the same point, you have other lineups that are kind of killing it. So maybe stick with those. Again, how do you find the right balance? That's not an easy thing to do, right? I think, again, some of this is on purpose, not him just being stubborn and like hating Hawkins. And look, there is some of that with Willie Green, right? We saw it with Trey, just kind of gluing him to the bench. But then Trey in his second year really started to break out. And so maybe they're just kind of following a similar plan for Jordan Hawkins, even if it really frustrates us at times. But with the way that guys like Najee Marshall, Jose Alvarado, even Dyson Daniels have been playing, I don't know if there's as many minutes for Hawkins if you want to take them away from those guys. Again, you're sacrificing the now for the future, which is worth doing, I think. But also, if you got to make the playoffs, I don't know. That's a tough equation to try and balance. So I don't think it means that Willie's incapable of growth. I think it's, our expectation is this. I'm meeting those goals. Let's keep going forward with all of this, right? I was in Pelican Spaces on X Twitter after, I think, the Wizards game we were talking, hosted by Rocky and some of the others there, the Pels 12. It was fun to be in there. Charles Chambers, Dylan as well. And so we were talking about that, and I was going into some of the coaching things because I heard some things that I thought were really interesting, right? Here's some of the things that I said in that when it comes to coaching. I view it this way, right? Like, I don't think coaching matters that much. I think there's 5 guys in the league that win you games, help you win. There's 5 guys in the league that actively don't. And then I think there's 20 guys, the middle part of that, that's just like whatever and don't really have an impact like either way. I think Willie Green's in that middle 20, right? Like, I don't know where in that middle 20, but it doesn't really matter. Now, I think you could make the claim that if you don't have one of those top 5 guys, you should be looking to go get one of those top 5 guys, right? This was a lot of the argument around Bill Belichick in the NFL, right? He's an upgrade over many head coaches, so why wouldn't you take the upgrade available? It's fair. But I think we also haven't seen Willie Green kind of reach some of his potential just yet. You know, look at a guy like Mike Malone. He was fired from Sacramento. Now, that was a mistake probably, but he was fired from there before he became the head coach that he is. It takes growth. When you look at Mike Malone, his first 3 years in Denver, I don't think he made the postseason at all before, really kind of figuring some things out. But was it also maybe that just like Jokic got better and that was the biggest thing? Like, there were stories and articles about Mike Malone being on the hot seat. Yeah, Denver didn't make the playoffs their first 3 years with him as head coach. They were 33-49 his first year, 40-42 his second year, then 46-36 his third year. That's actually a fairly similar trajectory to Willie Green, right? First year, make it through the play-in with a losing record. Last year, they were 2 games above 500. This year, they're on pace for 48-49 wins, right? And then in his fourth year, that's when Michael Malone took him to the playoffs and things like really got significantly better. So you look at that and go, okay, Willie Green is still kind of on that trajectory, just with a little bit of playoffs earlier, I think. So that doesn't necessarily mean that things should change. In that spaces, I blanked on what I call it. That was weird moment. In that spaces moment, in that chat the other day, someone was saying, and I forget who y'all were. I'm sorry if I'm not giving you the credit that's due here. Of, maybe you look at this and it's like, okay, you often have guys that kind of lay the foundation, then someone takes you like a step further, right? And like it's that second head coach who's supposed to elevate you. I don't disagree with some of that, right? Like I at all, but I think one thing to keep in mind is this team tried that before. They fired Monty Williams and then replaced him with Alvin Gentry, thinking Gentry was really going to help him take the leap. And that didn't work, like at all, like not even close, right? So when you see that, I think you've also got to look at it that the grass isn't always greener. And so maybe some of the frustrations with Willie Green, maybe not necessarily, are kind of by design because things are working and you don't want to rock the boat too much. And then you go into next season with a lot more data here. And that's when you make some of the bigger changes, right? Like they tried to make bigger changes to the offense this season. They're not really achieving all of that they want to do. There's moments with it, but I think that has more to do with the players than it does the coaching staff and James Borrego and those type of guys, right? Like some of these guys are playing Borrego ball, some aren't. Right? Like, and I think if they're just not, but the player's good enough, you just got to deal with it. Right? Like that's kind of how some of this goes, I think. So I don't put a lot of that on head coach Willie Green, and the fact that they are improving as a team every year. And again, these seasons are connected while also being individual years. Think about what next year could be with more data and knowing what you need to work on and what you need to change. And there's still a lot of unanswered questions. So I don't think that Willie Green needs to go yet. I don't think he's incapable of growth. I think when you look at it, it's like, things are good. Like, I'm not going to mess this up. And I think that's sometimes the biggest thing because we all want to see this team in the playoffs. And they could be in a position where they're not. Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments down below on YouTube. That's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, and I'll be back with y'all tomorrow.